everyone, welcome back to First Hand Globetrotting. I recently had my first ever flight on Spirit Airlines, so in this video I'll tell you about my first impressions of them and how they stack up to other airlines. Since I've been lucky enough to travel a lot, it's pretty rare that I have a chance to fly on a completely new airline, but I was a total Spirit rookie. If you've never heard of Spirit Airlines before, it's an ultra low-cost airline that flies mostly in the US with a few limited international destinations. I'll admit, I had heard plenty of horror stories about people's experiences with Spirit, but the price was just so cheap, half the price of any other airline. So I took the plunge and booked a round-trip flight with them so I could see for myself, a 5-hour flight each way. With Spirit, their super low fares are their main selling feature. I think the problem a lot of people have is that they see the cheap price and they assume that's going to give them the exact same travel experience as a full-cost airline. But that's not how it works at all. With Spirit, you get a basic seat on the airplane, but not much else. If you want anything more, you're going to have to pay for it. So, there are lots of add-on costs, and depending on what you actually need for your flight, they can really add up. The first thing is that you need to pay if you want a specific seat. This really isn't all that uncommon though. Most US airlines have a seat selection fee, and you can only pick a seat from the leftovers once you check in. But the big difference with Spirit is that if you don't pay, you never get a chance to pick yourself. They randomly assign you one, and you can't change it without paying. Also, they don't make any attempt to put your entire group next to each other. For my flight, we had 5 people under the same reservation, and Spirit spread us out over the entire plane. What I found really weird was that they gave us at least one window, middle, and aisle seat, but they didn't put them next to each other in one of the completely empty rows. To me, that really seemed like a trick to force people to pay the seat selection fee, and really didn't make the seat selection assignment any more efficient. The other really bad thing about how they assign seats is if you have kids traveling with you. See that seat? That was assigned to a 3-year-old. But Spirit put the parents here and here. And the next closest person in the group was still pretty far away. So, if you're traveling with children, they may be seated pretty far away from you. Or, if you don't have kids, you may end up with a crying child next to you with no parents anywhere nearby. But I will say that when we got to the airport, we talked to a Spirit employee, and they were able to switch our seats so the child wasn't off by herself, all for free. Overall, I found the Spirit staff to be incredibly friendly and helpful. And this was across the board. Check-in agents, gate agents, flight attendants, all really nice and friendly. This was a great surprise since airline staff, especially on low-budget airlines, can sometimes be a little grumpy. But when you do check in for your flight, make sure to print your boarding passes yourself. If you do it at the check-in terminal, there's a printing fee. And if you have an agent do it, the fee is even more. The next potential add-on is baggage. If you want a checked bag or a carry-on, you're going to have to pay for it. The only thing you can bring on for free is a small purse or backpack. Almost all of the major US airlines charge for a checked bag, and a few are starting to charge for carry-ons, so these fees aren't that unusual. The difference really comes when you look at how the costs change over time. If you pay for a bag right when you book, it's the cheapest. But as you get closer to the flight, the price keeps going up and up and up. And if you try to sneak a carry-on onto the plane without paying for it, it's going to cost you a lot more when they catch you. So, the sooner you can figure out if you need a bag or not, the better, since it'll help you keep the fees down. I thought it was interesting that they charge more for carry-ons than checked bags. I actually really liked this, since it meant that there were a lot less big carry-ons on my flight, and it didn't become a race to try to get space in the overhead compartments. But if you do pay for a checked bag, make sure you don't get tricked. Spirit only lets you take a 40-pound bag, whereas nearly every other US airline lets you have a 50-pound bag. And if you don't realize that and go over the weight limit, you guessed it, there's another big fee you have to pay. So, now let's talk about what it's like when you sit down in your seat. To start, you're going to notice that you have a lot less leg room than most other airlines. Spirit flights give you a 28-inch pitch, whereas most other US airlines give you between 30 and 33 inches. I was actually surprised to find that the seats were actually a little wider than average. Most North American economy airline seats are between 17 and 18 inches wide, and usually a little closer to 17. But Spirit's were 17 3/4. So the seat width was fine, but the legroom was a letdown, especially on a long flight. Adding to the legroom issue, none of the seats recline at all. So if you are hoping to take a nap, you'll need to do it sitting up. And since there's not much room between you and the seat in front of you, you don't have a full-size tray table, only tiny ones. Otherwise, the actual layout of the airplane was pretty much identical to any other airline. The one other big difference is that you aren't going to get any drinks or snacks for free, not even water. So if you want to eat or drink, make sure you bring your credit card. My flight didn't accept cash. My flight was pretty uneventful. It left right on time, arrived right on time, no problems at all. I've read that flight delays and cancellations can be a huge issue with Spirit. Since they don't operate as many flights as other airlines, it can be a real hassle trying to get rebooked and can cause huge delays. But I didn't have any delays, so I have no experience with that myself and can't say if they handle it well or not. Overall, I'd say my experience with Spirit was good. I do have experience with other ultra low-cost airlines like Ryanair and EasyJet, so I kind of knew what to expect with a complete bare-bones flight. If you want to have a good Spirit experience, I think the key is to realize that there will be some sort of added fees that you'll need to pay and figuring out what those fees are. That way, you can get a better sense of what your ticket will actually end up costing you, rather than thinking you're getting a great deal and then getting surprised by added costs. If you end up needing a lot of the add-ons, sometimes a Spirit flight ends up costing more than a ticket with a major airline. Overall, I think my favorite parts of Spirit were the cost of the flights and the friendliness of the staff. Those were both fantastic and scored major points with me. The biggest negatives for me were the things that seemed like they were meant to trick people. Separating groups of people when equivalent seats were available next to each other seemed like a sneaky trick. And so did making the weight of paid bags 10 pounds less than any other airline. Upfront fees and rules are one thing, but I was a little annoyed that these things seem to be done to catch people off guard in order to get extra fees. But overall, I think I'd be open to flying with Spirit Airlines again. I think the ideal Spirit flight would be about 3 hours or less when you're flying alone and don't need much baggage. That way you get all the low-cost benefits without any of the more expensive add-ons. If you have any questions about my experience with Spirit, ask me in the comments. And make sure to like the video, share it with your friends, and of course, subscribe to my channel. On Twitter, I'm Firsthand Globe. On Instagram, I'm Firsthand Globetrotting. Follow me on there. And don't forget, it's an incredible world out there, so pick up your passport and do some firsthand globetrotting of your own.